Yes, boys, today's video. If I wanted to grow as much muscle as possible in the next 180 days, this would be the exact strategy that I would follow. I made a video on exactly how to lose as much fat as possible in 90 days. Now we're going to talk about muscle growth because this was highly requested. And I'm not going to say 90 days because muscle growth takes a long time and we need to devote a significant period of the year locking in to actually focus on gaining size and gaining muscle tissue. So if you're watching anyone's video promises you to gain a shit ton of muscle in 90 days, chances are they're just feeding you a load of bullshit. You need at least 6 months, ideally a year or so. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what I would do if I was in that situation. Now, we've obviously changed up the presentation style, as you can see. So we're going to get stuck in. Step one. This might sound backwards, but hear me out. We need to get lean. We got to get shredded first before we even think about gaining a shit ton of muscle. The reason why is because we're going to gain a little bit of fat when we're gaining muscle, and that's inevitable. But if you are already starting in a position of high body fat, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Why? Because if we're going to gain more fat, then effectively it's going to shorten our runway and how long we can actually gain muscle for. Why? Because you're eventually going to look in the mirror and be overweight. You're not going to have any sort of muscle definition, which is just going to destroy your motivation and make yourself ask, why am I even doing this? And you're going to act out of emotion and then want to go into a cut. So we want to basically bridge that gap and pretty much make it the runway as long as possible before we even have to think about cutting. And the way to do that is just to get nice and lean first. That way you can pretty much see what your physique is capable of, and we're just trying to add tissue to that to begin with. So get lean first. The biggest mistake you can make is starting at around 12 to 15% body fat. My personal opinion, you want to be 10% body fat or lower. And then you want to be slowly working towards, 15 to 16% body fat at a max. Don't really want to be going to 20. It's really dependent on your goals. But if you are after that aesthetic physique, to look shredded and to have abs year round, then this is what you want to be doing. And I'm pretty sure everyone wants to be having abs year round. So make sure you're getting lean first. Doesn't have to take long. It really does depend on your starting position. But just make sure you've got a good foundation before you think about starting gaining. That's a mistake I made in the past. I wish someone told me that. So there you have it. Whenever a client comes in and works for myself, typically what we do is we do a recomp. We just simply get them understanding the kind of principles of hypertrophy and also just removing as much body fat as possible so they can then go into that gaining phase with solid condition, and ideally we keep that for the rest of the year. And I explain exactly how we do that. But pretty much the beauty of getting lean is you now have this period to basically focus on burning as much calories as possible, which is obviously going to remove body fat whilst retaining muscle. And in order to retain muscle, training performance needs to be high. Execution and accuracy with your training needs to be pretty much 100%. So what I like to think of is, right, you're not going to be building substantial amount of muscle in this deficit. That's only going to be the case if you're undertrained or you're new to the gym. So you can actually use this time as a bit of a test, trial and error phase to basically figure out what works. So when you go into a point, which we're going to talk about, a surplus where muscle gain is more favorable, you actually have the principles to make sure that you're gaining muscle in the right manner and most efficiently. So what we can be mastering here is not focusing on lifting such heavy weights, reason why we don't even have the glycogen to do so, but focusing on our form and our tempo. Are we getting 6 to 7 second reps? Are we controlling the eccentric portion? Are we really focusing on mind to muscle connection? A little trick, I like to close my eyes and think about what it is I'm actually trying to target. For example, if it's an incline chest press, have I positioned the bench in the right way? Have I focused on the upper chest kind of fibers here, which I'm trying to target? And things like this. And that's what's beautiful about the kind of dieting phase, the cutting phase when you're trying to get lean. You can get all of these foundation habits right. So when we pump in some food, some carbohydrates, you know exactly how to train and you're actually going to grow stronger and gain more muscle. So that's why step one is get lean. Now, after that, once we've done that, and it really depends on what starting position you're in, we then want to reverse into a surplus. Now, this bit is crucial, I'm telling you. So once we are shredded, we now need to reverse into a surplus, but the way you do this is slowly. So there's a little hack that I like to use when it comes to dieting and gaining. When you're dieting, you're trying to lose as much weight so you're trying to lose weight with the highest amount of calories. And when you're gaining, you're trying to gain weight with the lowest amount of calories possible, if that makes sense. The reason why is because your body likes to adapt. Therefore, if you start with the minimum amount that you need, you have room to progress. For example, if you was to drop your calories to 2,000 straight away on week 1 of a deficit. What happens when your body adapts? Where do you go? 1,800, 1,600. Now there's side effects of that. Training performance is going to go in the bin. You're not going to be very happy. You're probably not going to have enough energy to actually focus on your daily life. So you've shot yourself in the foot by allowing your body to adapt to something that was not sustainable. The same way, if you reverse out of that phase from 2,000 calories and just jump to 3,000 because you want to put yourself in a surplus, which is actually fairly smart, right? If your maintenance is 2.8, logically speaking, you should be going into about 3,000 surplus. 3,000 calories put you in a 200 calorie surplus. However, that's also shooting yourself in the foot because your body will adapt quick. It will also add a lot of excess fat, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then you're just shortening that runway because when your body adapts to 3,000, what happens next? We have to go 3.2, and you'll be on 5,000 calories before you know it, and it will get very, very hard. What we should do, right, if we're at the 2,000 calorie range at the end of our deficit, let's say, we just want to slowly increase our calories and just test what's happening with the scale weight. So instantly you're going to see an increase in glycogen around 1 to 2 kilo. We don't consider that accurate, obviously, muscle gain, right? That's just kind of water, that's normal. That's you just hydrating your body again and pulling glycogen back into the muscles. But after 2 weeks and you've increased from 2K to 2,200, see if there's any weight gain. If there is, happy days. Keep it there. And when weight gain stalls for more than 7 days, in my opinion, we then add calories to 2,400. And let's see if we're gaining weight there. Are we gaining weight there? Good. And you do that. And that's going to make sure that you have enough fuel to essentially perform, to actually train, to grow muscle. And that way you're not going to gain fat because you're doing it patiently, which is one of the most important things. Be patient. Remember, rule 1 is do not get fat. So we have to make sure that we're reversing out of it slowly. And that's kind of the way you do things. Do it in accordance to your scale weight. And just think of slow improvements. Like at the end of the day, if you had X amount of carbohydrates at 2,000 calories, at 2.2, you're going to have more. So you're going to be getting stronger. Why? Because you have more carbohydrates. Don't go for the home run and just go 3,000. Like just gradually increase it. And that way you're going to make sure that you're actually growing muscle. And when the scale goes up, it's muscle mass and not just fat. If you were to just jump from 2,000 to 3,000, you're going to gain a lot of fat. And that's not what we want because that's not going to allow you to grow the most amount of muscle. Why? Because you're going to have to cut prematurely. So make sure you're adding carbohydrates and you're doing it slowly in accordance to scale weight. The key is to do this slowly. Remember that. Now, step 3. Then once we've reversed into the gaining phase, once we're at about metabolism, calories, 2.6, 2.8, here, could take a month, could take 2 months. It really depends. Realistically, 5 weeks. We then commit to, in my opinion, a year-long gaining phase. Now, the reason why, the title of this video was, if I wanted to grow as much muscle as possible, I'd commit for a year. Realistically, depending on where you are in your journey, if you just started, 2 years. But I think 1 year is a solid amount. 6 months is 100% the minimum. 4 months is just silly, like 6 months, unless you've got some sort of like really strict schedule and events or whatever. But 6 months minimum, and ideally a year. So the reason why is because when we're in a surplus, this is where muscle is grown. This is the hard part. This is where you're trying to pack on size. This is where bodybuilders will basically commit to what's called an off-season, right? So let's just take Chris Bumstead, for example, right? He goes on stage, becomes Mr. Olympia, absolutely shredded. Now, unless he's got a few more shows or whatever, which he doesn't, he will then take some time off and then go into an off season, which, can be for however long. I'm not really sure. Obviously, the Mr. Olympia is every year. So this might be like, let's say 8 months, right? And then he'll just focus on gaining as much size as possible by just feeding his body and just training hard. So think of like the gaining phase of an off season, essentially. It's where you're basically trying to feed yourself as much as possible, obviously in accordance to scale weight and making sure you're not gaining much fat. And you're just trying to get stronger. We're not trying to get fat, we're just trying to get stronger. And the way we get stronger is by increasing our carbohydrates and our calories in accordance to strength plateaus and what's actually happening with the scale. So to make sure that we're doing this properly, track everything. You have to track everything. So you track your lifts, number 1. If you don't know what you lifted last week, and you should, come on, you should know this by now, if you're following me 100%. But you need to be tracking, obviously, what you lifted last week. And you need to be doing it in a strategic way. So there's 2 ways, only 2 ways in my opinion. Not notes. Stop using notes. There's logbook, which is pretty decent because stops you from going on your phone. However, I had a debate with my brother about logbooks. I'm not a fan of logbooks. I'm a fan of using apps. Reason why is because my phone's with me wherever I go. So I've always got access to it. There's nothing worse than imagine leaving your logbook on the dining table or on your desk. And when you get to the gym, you're like, right, well, now I don't know how to work out. I don't know what to do. Like, fuck that. And I asked him, he's done it a few times. And also, it's just longer. You actually have to write, like, probably, expending a little bit of energy with the hand there. Nah, none of this. I'm a phone man, but you got to think also when you're tracking on the phone, you got to be very disciplined. You got to have do not disturb on and make sure plane mode ideally, and make sure you're not going on different apps. Make sure that you're tracking everything in terms of your lifts, and you know exactly what you lifted last week, so you can progress it the following week. And the way I like to progress things is by adding weight without fail every single week, especially when in a gaining phase. And I'll explain this on the next slide. But that's kind of what we do with lifts. We track our weights, we make sure what's going up. We then track our scale weight, and you need to make a habit of doing this daily, not weekly, daily, okay? There's some people who get emotional about weight. They see fluctuations and they get upset. Don't be that person. Track your weight daily, okay? And do it accurately. If you don't have a scale in your house, you are not going to make it. I'm telling you right now. I made shit progress when I weighed myself at the gym. Do you know why? Because when you weigh yourself at the gym, what happens is you obviously have eaten food, you drunk a load of water, you should be going to that gym hydrated. So that weight is never accurate and will never be consistent. So therefore you lose the motivation to actually track it because it's not accurate. However, what if you were to actually create a system that allows you to accurately track your weight? And the way you do this is very simple. It's what I do with all my clients. They weigh themselves first thing fasted and they put the scale in their bathroom. So when they brush their teeth, they do it then. Even better, ideally do weigh yourself after you go into the toilet because that's your true weight, right? If you ate something last night, it changes things. So if you weigh yourself first thing in the morning, that's your true weight. And what you want to do, right? I've got my own app, which I track things on, but for you, perhaps there's an app on the App Store or Notes or whatever it is. Simply put, right, today's the 25th of February. 25th of February, weight 70 kilograms. 26th of February. And what you should be seeing, right, depending on where you want to go, so obviously you're trying to gain size, unless you're in the getting lean phase, your weight should be trending upwards. And what you can do, in my opinion, what I would do is have an app or have a spreadsheet for this, right? But you want to do basically weekly averages. So there will be fluctuations, less fluctuations if you're tracking accurately, as we spoke about. But if you essentially go off a weekly weight on, let's say, Sunday, it's not necessarily accurate. But if you go on a weekly average based on Monday to Sunday and you go off that data, and you see that 0.3 to 0.6 gain, which is kind of what we're looking for, 0.2 to 0.6 gain really. Any more is kind of just a bit too much and any less isn't favourable. Then we're in a good zone. We don't need to increase calories, everything's going well. For whatever reason we go under 0.2, probably need to increase calories a little bit. If for whatever reason, past the kind of glycogen loading phase, we're gaining more than 0.6, you're probably eating too many calories. So one, don't even think about increasing your calories, and two, perhaps do a little bit extra cardio that week. Focus on your fitness and naturally you'll kind of level out. Those are the ways you want to think about it. Don't do anything too drastic. That's the most important thing. And finally, track your foods. Make sure that if you're going to say, you're right, we need to eat 2.4k calories, you're not guessing, you're tracking it. And the way you track it is very simple. Create a meal plan for the days that you train. Create a meal plan for the days that you rest. You can do this on Excel. You can do this with a coach. You can do this on apps. It's not that hard. If you need someone to make one for you, I can do that. But really, in order to really create something sustainable, just find out what it is you like eating, what you can eat on a weekly basis, and then just create one meal plan for the days you train and one meal plan for days you don't train. The more variation you have, the more decision fatigue there is, and the likelihood is it's just going to get harder. And also, I don't like to waste time tracking calories, so I just eat the same shit. Simple as that. Like, it's ingrained in my head now. I don't need to track my calories anymore, unless like I've run out of a little thing I need to make a substitute. So track all your foods and keep it accurate. Use a food scale. Make sure you're weighing stuff out on a food scale. Make sure that you're not throwing in hidden calories. I understand you're on a bulk and you're on a surplus, but still accuracy is key. So don't just be smashing a load of olive oil on the pan. That's 200 to 300 calories extra. It's going to mean you gain fat. Think about milk in your coffees, right? Obviously, it doesn't matter too much, but just think about it, especially when you're in a deficit. And then also think about certain fizzy drinks. Are you drinking Coke Zeros as opposed to full sugar? Things like this. That's kind of what I would say, and that's what's going to ensure you're using all of your food and you're keeping your condition rather than just storing stuff as fat. Because at the end of the day, if you're not using all of the carbohydrates, protein, and fats, what happens is your body stores it as fat. So what I'm trying to basically hit home with here is make sure that you're using all of the food so it all goes to the fucking biceps, not the abs. Sorry, you won't want it going to your stomach. So you don't want to be gaining any fat. We want all of this food going to the chest, the biceps, the back, legs, all of that. None of it's fat. All right, that's step 3. I went on a bit of a ramble there, but it was worth it. Now, step 4. Focus on getting stronger. Good bodybuilder, Jordan Peters, always talks about this. Success leaves clues. If there's a geezer who can bench 200 kilo, or can shoulder press this, or can squat 6 plates, chances are he's probably fucking massive. So if you reverse engineer that, realize in order to get bigger, you must get stronger. There's a reason why these guys can lift such heavy weights. It's because they're often the biggest. And just break that down and realize the stronger a muscle is, the bigger it typically is. So what do you need to do to get bigger and gain as much muscle as possible? Well, you need to get stronger. Therefore, we need to use these calories to our advantage and make sure that we're getting stronger. If you're just eating more, you're not going to gain weight. If your training is shit, doesn't matter. Okay? Unless your training intensity or your training is 10 out of 10 or at least, like an 8 out of 10, that food is going to waste and it's just going to be stored. So we need to make sure, are we training to failure? Are we actually pushing to the point where we physically can't move our arms anymore? Are we doing that? Are we doing it with the correct form and execution? Have we got mind to muscle connection on lock? And this is where you want to be focusing on that kind of getting lean phase and really having all those principles down. So we're not learning in surplus. Instead, we're learning then, and now it's game time. Now we're trying to gain some muscle. And the way I like to do things is simply add a small increment of weight. Jordan Peters always talks about this as well. Add a little biscuit, 1.25 kilo. Just make that a habit. It's almost a bit of a placebo effect as well. Just like if you can just chuck a bit of weight on without realizing, you're naturally just going to get stronger. Because there's often times where we're trying to increase the rep range and perhaps we might do the same thing because there's a mental block. But when you actually put more weight on the bar, you're going to lift more. So I would make sure that you're doing that, but obviously make sure that tempo and accuracy with the rep is there. We're not just rushing it to lift that extra load. Like if you are doing that, then you're going to have to come back. We're trying to make sure things are controlled. But with the amount of foods you should be eating, really, you should be getting stronger each week. And this should be easy to add a little bit more. Like when I was benching, when I was in a surplus, I was adding about 1.25 every single week without fail. And failing that, you can get the little 0.5 kg plates and add them. So that's just kind of the main thing. If you want to get stronger, simply add more weight. It's one of the best stimulus, as well as having that back offset to allow for more blood flow. A little tip I'd recommend is filming your sets and reviewing them, making sure that really you've got that tempo and control down to the letter. Focus all of your attention on getting stronger and just keeping that form. And just keep reviewing yourself. If your form is going in the bin, then come back a step, rinse and repeat, so on and so forth. But make sure you're focusing on getting stronger. Very, very key. And then, final step, and probably the most important, is be patient. Now, I said at the start of the video, 180 days. With 6 months, which is 180 days, of following this, you can realistically expect to have gained around 8 to 10 kg, in my opinion. Now, some of that will be fat. That's around 20 pounds or so. But a lot of that will be muscle. And it really does depend on kind of what part of the journey you're in. If you're starting out, 100% you can do that. If you're an intermediate lifter, 2 to 3 years in. I've been training for 4 or 5 years. I'd say 4 years properly. So really, I can gain probably another 10 kilo of muscle or so, but probably without gear, if I'm being completely honest. So that's kind of a reasonable thing target for myself. Probably gain 4, 5 kilo of muscle. But you can expect to gain around 8 to 10 kilo, roughly. Dependence on kind of where you're at. And that can be done in 6 months. So think about what you can do in a year. That's why I say do it in a year. You could just double your output. And if you follow the principles I spoke about, which is why I stress the importance of it so much, you don't have to do what most people do, which is a massive cut that just wipes out your timeline. At the end of the day, if you can get all of these principles better, if you can get all these principles right when you're young, the better. Why? Testosterone is higher. So if you're spending fucking your younger years just cutting loads of fat because you don't know how to train and you gained a load of fat for no reason, like you're just missing out on those golden years of gaining. So get this right and make sure that you're not putting on a load of fat, so you have to do this massive cut which takes 5 to 6 months, when really you could have just focused on being patient, doing a longer bulk which is going to gain you more muscle, and doing it the right way. So you obviously only have to do a 1 to 2 month cut, which means you can then go into another bulk, and that way you spend more time. Because if we look at that on a 2-year basis, who spends more time in the gaining phase, gaining more muscle? The latter guy. Why? Because he actually took things slowly and was patient. So the most important thing is your mindset. Are you patient? Can you really delay gratification? And it just comes down to sitting with yourself and go, right, what do I want? More muscle, right? I want to be bigger. Okay, so what do we need to do to get bigger? Well, we need to be patient. We need to make sure we don't put on loads of fat. Why do we need to make sure we do that? Okay, because if we go into a cut, we're not going to be growing muscle. That's where muscle growth is not favourable, in a cut. Therefore, we want to be spending as minimal time possible in a cutting period. So how do we do that? Don't get fat. There you go. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So reverse engineer this, sit with yourself, and you realise it takes a level of maturity. But rule number 1, don't get fat. And then you can choose to keep going. The more patient you are, the longer you can stay in that gaining phase. But really, you're going to be looking at around a year or so. And the longer you stay, the better. The key is just to be patient and don't rush results. And if you do everything right, you don't have to do a long dieting phase. If you're doing a year of gaining, and really 4 months max dieting. If you're doing 6 months, 1 to 2 months. So think of it as a good opportunity, right? I mean, if we're talking right now, if someone wants to implement what we spoke about right now, today is February the 25th. If you spend the next month or so getting insanely lean, we now get to March 25th, right? We can get sub 10% by March 25th. Cool. Perhaps April 25th. Perhaps 2 months. Call it 2 months, right? Then we're spending about a month reversing. So by May 25th, you're still insanely lean and now you're fuller. So by May 25th, you still have condition. And then, because basically the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people are like, oh, summer's coming up, I don't want to start a bulk. Let's hear me out. By May 25th, you're reversing and you're now fuller, but you're still lean, right? And then if you do everything I said and you go into the surplus and you do it slowly for June, July and August, maybe August, June, July, you will not have gained much fat. So what will happen is you will keep your condition and you will essentially look massive. You will be fuller. So you don't have to worry about that. And then you'll start to accrue a little bit of fat when you get into October and November. But then it's winter. So time is now. Time is now, guys. Follow this video and that's exactly how you can gain more muscle. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to put on some size. Remember, if you got an event, if you go into IB for whatever it is, you can literally just drop your fucking carbohydrates and all the water you're retaining will just disappear. Bang. 2 days. And then you shred it. Pretty much. Depending on how much fat you've got at the moment. But that's pretty much what I would do if I wanted to gain as much muscle as possible in 6 months. Hope that video was useful. I hope I explained everything in a strategical way and that does make sense. Hope it wasn't too complicated. If that does make sense, and you enjoyed that, please drop a subscribe. I will be posting daily videos, and that is my biggest goal this year. I'm trying not to miss a single episode, and I'm doing pretty well with that. So we should have 365 videos by the end of the year, which is going to be good. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. Another one will be out tomorrow. I also want to say, if you are someone who wants to really transform their physique this year and is confused with all the misinformation on there and wants yours truly to help you out, there's a link in my description to book a call with me to potentially kind of walk you through your goals and find out a little bit more about you. So if you are struggling, please do click that link and we'll be in touch. But other than that, boys, we're back tomorrow. Have a great day. Catch you on the next one. All the best.